The Last Drop in the Chalice, Part 1. The day after a wedding is solitary. The privacy of the happy is respected, and thus their slumber is a little belated. The tumult of visits and felicitations does not commence until later. It was on the morning of the 17th of February, a little afternoon, when Basque, his napkin and duster under his arm, busy doing his antechamber, heard a light rap at the door. There was no ring, which is considerate on such a day. Basque opened and saw Monsieur Fauchelevent. He introduced him into the parlour, still cumbered and topsy-turvy, and having the appearance of the battlefield of the evening's festivities. There was a noise at the door. Jean Valjean raised his eyes. Marius entered, his head erect, his mouth smiling, an indescribable light upon his face, his forehead radiant, his eye triumphant. He also had not slept.
"It is you, father," exclaimed he, on perceiving Jean Valjean. "But you come too early. It's only half an hour after noon yet. Cosette is asleep."
He continued. Words overflowed from him, which is characteristic of these divine paroxysms of joy.
"We have both of us talked much about you. Cosette loves you so much. You will not forget that your room is here. We will have no more of the Rue de l'Homme Armé. We will have no more of it at all. You will come and install yourself here, and that today, or you will have a bone to pick with Cosette. She intends to lead us all by the nose, I warn you. You have seen your room. It's close by ours. It looks upon the gardens. Every spring, in the clump of acacias, which is the front of your windows, there comes a nightingale. You will have her in 2 months. There is, I believe, a little valise which you treasure. I have selected a place of honour for it. You have conquered my grandfather. You suit him. We will live together. We have absolutely decided to be very happy. And you are part of our happiness. Do you understand, father? Come now. You breakfast with us today."
"Monsieur," said Jean Valjean, "I have one thing to tell you. I am an old convict." The limit of perceptible acute sounds may be passed quite as easily for the mind as for the ear. Those words, "I am an old convict," coming from Monsieur Fauchelevent's mouth and entering Marius' ear, went beyond the possible. Marius did not hear. It seemed to him that something had just been said to him, but he knew not what. He stood aghast. He then perceived that the man who was talking to him was terrible. Excited as he was, he had not until this moment noticed that frightful pallor. Marius stammered out,
What does this mean?"
"It means," answered Jean Valjean, "that I have been in the galleys."
"You drive me mad!"
exclaimed Marius in dismay. "Monsieur Pontmercy," said Jean Valjean, "I was 19 years in the galleys, for robbery. Then I was sentenced for life, for robbery, for a second offence. At this hour I am in breach of ban." It was useless for Marius to recoil before the reality, to refuse the fact, to resist the evidence. He was compelled to yield. He began to comprehend, and as always happens in such a case, he comprehended beyond the truth. He felt the shiver of a horrible interior flash. An idea which made him shudder crossed his mind. He caught a glimpse in the future of a hideous destiny for himself.
Tell all, cried he. "You are Cosette's father."
And he took 2 steps backward with an expression of unspeakable horror. Jean Valjean raised his head with such majesty of attitude that he seemed to rise to the ceiling. "It is necessary that you believe me in this, monsieur, although the oath of such as I be not received." Here he made a pause. Then, with a sovereign and sepulchral authority, he added, articulating slowly and emphasizing his syllables, "You will believe me, I, the father of Cosette? Before God, no. Monsieur Baron Pontmercy, I am a peasant of Faverolles. I earned my living by pruning trees. My name is not Fauchelevent. My name is Jean Valjean. I am nothing to Cosette. Compose yourself." Jean Valjean continued. "What am I to Cosette? A passer. 10 years ago, I did not know that she existed. I love her, this is true. She was an orphan, without father or mother. She had need of me. That is why I began to love her. Children are so weak that anybody, even a man like me, may be their protector. I perform that duty with regard to Cosette, record that mitigating circumstance. Today Cosette leaves my life. Our 2 roads separate. Henceforth I can do nothing more for her. She is Madame Pontmercy. Her protector is changed, and Cosette gains by the change. All is well." Jean Valjean looked at Marius in the face, and with a bitter emphasis he added, "Monsieur Pontmercy, this is not common sense, but I am an honest man. It is by degrading myself in your eyes that I elevate myself in my own. This has already happened to me once, but it was less grievous then. It was nothing. Yes, an honest man. I should not be one, if you had, by my fault, continued to esteem me. Now that you despise me, I am one. I have this fatality upon me that, being forever unable to have any but stolen consideration, that consideration humiliates me and depresses me inwardly. And in order that I may respect myself, I must be despised. Then I hold myself erect. I am a galley slave who obeys his conscience. I know well that it is improbable. But what would you have me do? It is so. I have assumed engagements toward myself. I keep them. There are accidents which bind us. There are chances which drag us into duties. You see, Monsieur Pontmercy, some things have happened to me in my life. Jean Valjean paused again, swallowing his saliva with effort, as if his words had a bitter aftertaste, and resumed. To be a false signature in flesh and blood, to be a living false key, to enter the houses of honest people by picking their locks, never to look again, always to squint, to be infamous within myself. No, 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 no. It is better to suffer, to bleed, to weep, to tear the skin from the flesh with the nails, to pass the nights in writhing, in anguish, to gnaw away body and soul. That is why I come to tell you all this, in mere wantonness, as you say. He breathed with difficulty, and forced out these final words. To live, once I stole a loaf of bread. Today, to live, I will not steal a name.
To live?
Interrupted Marius.
You have no need of that name to live.
Ah, I understand, answered Jean Valjean, raising and lowering his head several times in succession. Marius crossed the parlour slowly, and when he was near Jean Valjean, extended him his hand. But Marius had to take that hand which did not offer itself. Jean Valjean was passive, and it seemed to Marius that he was grasping a hand of marble.
Poor Cosette,
murmured he.
When she knows.
At these words, Jean Valjean trembled in every limb. He fixed upon Marius a bewildered eye.
Cosette. Oh, yes, it is true. You will tell this to Cosette. That is right. Stop. I had not thought of that. People have the strength for some things, but not for others. Monsieur, I beseech you, I entreat you. Monsieur, give me your most sacred word. Do not tell her. Is it not enough that you know it yourself? Be calm, said Marius. I will keep your secret for myself alone.
And less softened perhaps than he should have been, but obliged for an hour past to familiarize himself with fearful surprise, seeing by degrees a convict superimposed before his eyes upon Monsieur Fauchelevent, possessed little by little of this dismal reality, and led by the natural tendency of the position to determine the distance which had just been put between this man and himself, Marius added,
It is impossible that I should not say a word to you of the trust which you have so faithfully and so honestly restored. That is an act of probity. It is just that a recompense should be given you. Fix the sum yourself. It shall be counted out to you. Do not be afraid to fix it very high.
I thank you, monsieur, answered Jean Valjean greatly. He remained thoughtful a moment, passing the end of his forefinger over his thumbnail mechanically. Then he raised his voice.
It is all nearly finished. There is one thing left. What?
Jean Valjean had said, as it were, a supreme hesitation, and voiceless, almost breathless, he faltered out rather than said,
Now that you know, do you think, monsieur, you who are master, that I ought not see Cosette again? I think that would be best,
answered Marius coldly.
I shall not see her again,
murmured Jean Valjean, and he walked toward the door. He placed his hand upon the knob. The latch yielded, the door started. Jean Valjean opened it wide enough to enable him to pass out, stopped a second motionless, then shut the door and turned toward Marius. He was no longer pale, he was livid. There were no longer tears in his eyes, but a sort of tragical flame. His voice again became strangely calm.
But, monsieur, said he, if you are willing, I will come and see her. I assure you that I desire it very much. If I had not clung to seeing Cosette, I should not have made the avowal which I have made. I should have gone away, but wishing to stay in the place where Cosette is, and continue to see her, I was compelled in honor to tell you all. You follow my reasoning, do you not? There is a thing which explains itself. You see, for 9 years past, I have had her near me. I don't know whether you understand me, Monsieur Pontmercy, but from the present time, to see her no more, to speak to her no more, to have nothing more, That would be hard. If you do not think it wrong, I will come from time to time to see Cosette. I should not come often. I would not stay long. You might say I should be received in the little low room, on the ground floor. I would willingly come in by the back door, which is for the servants, but that would excite wonder, perhaps. It is better, I suppose, that I should enter by the usual door. Monsieur, indeed, I would really like to see Cosette still a little. As rarely as you please. Put yourself in my place. It is all that I have. And then we must take care. If I should not come at all, it would have a bad effect. It would be thought singular. For instance, what can I do? Is to come in the evening, at nightfall. You will come every evening, said Marius, and Cosette will expect you. You are kind, monsieur, said Jean Valjean.
Marius bowed to Jean Valjean. Happiness conducted Despair to the door, and these two men separated. Part 2. Marius was completely unhinged. The kind of repulsion which he had always felt for the man whom he saw, Cosette, was now explained. There was something strangely enigmatic in this person, of which his instinct had warned him. This enigma was the most hideous of disgraces, the galleys. This Monsieur Fauchelevent was the convict Jean Valjean. Was the happiness of Marius and Cosette condemned henceforth to this fellowship? Was that a foregone conclusion? Did the acceptance of this man form a part of the marriage which had been consummated? Was there nothing more to be done? Had Marius espoused the convict also? The former repulsion of Marius toward this man, toward this Fauchelevent become Jean Valjean, was now mingled with horror. In this horror, we must say, there was some pity, and also a certain astonishment. This robber, this twice convicted robber, had restored a trust. And what a trust! 600,000 francs. He alone was in the secret of the trust. He might have kept all, but he had given up all. Moreover, he had revealed his condition of his own accord. Nothing obliged him to do so. And from what motive? From conscientious scruples. He had explained it himself with the irresistible accent of reality. In short, whatever this Jean Valjean might be, he had incontestably an awakened conscience. There was in him some mysterious regeneration begun. An awakening of conscience is a greatness of soul. In the mysterious account which Marius thoughtfully drew up concerning this Jean Valjean, he verified the credit, he verified the debit. He attempted to arrive at a balance, but it was all, as it were, in a storm. Marius, endeavoring to get a clear idea of this man, and pursuing, so to speak, Jean Valjean in the depth of his thought, lost him, and found him again in a fatal mist. The trust honestly surrendered, the probity of the avowal, that was good. It was like a break in the cloud, but the cloud again became black. Why had this man come into the barricade? For now Marius saw that reminiscence again distinctly, appearing in these emotions like sympathetic ink before the fire. This man was in the barricade. He did not fight there. What did he come there for? Before this question a spectre arose and made response. Javert. Marius recalled perfectly to mind at this hour the fateful sight of Jean Valjean dragging Javert, bound, outside the barricade, and he heard again the frightful pistol shot behind the corner of the little Rue Montour. There was probably hatred between the spy and this galley slave. The one cramped the other. Jean Valjean had gone to the barricade to avenge himself. He had arrived late. He knew probably that Javert was a prisoner there. Jean Valjean had killed Javert. At least that seemed evident. Finally, a last question. But to this no answer. This question Marius felt like a sting. How did it happen that Jean Valjean's existence had touched Cosette so long? What was this gloomy game of Providence which had placed this child in contact with this man? What was this bandit, religiously absorbed in the adoration of a virgin, watching over her, bringing her up, guarding her, dignifying her, and enveloping her himself impure with purity? What was this cloaca, which had venerated this innocence to such an extent as to leave it immaculate? What was this Jean Valjean, watching over the education of Cosette? What was this figure of darkness, whose only care was to preserve from all shadow and from all cloud the rising of a star? In this was the secret of Jean Valjean. In this was also the secret of God. Before this double secret, Marius recoiled. The one, in some sort, reassured him in regard to the other. God was as visible in this as Jean Valjean. God has his instruments. He uses what tool he pleases. Is it the first time that the dunghill has aided the spring to make the rose? Jean Valjean was a passer. He had said so himself. Well, he was passing away. Whatever he might be, his part was finished. Henceforth, Marius was to perform the functions of Providence for Cosette. Cosette had come forth to find in the azure her mate, her lover, her husband, her celestial male. In taking flight, Cosette, winged and transfigured, left behind her on the ground, empty and hideous, her chrysalis, Jean Valjean. In whatever circle of ideas Marius turned, he always came back from it to certain horror of Jean Valjean. Marius, upon penal questions, although a democrat, still adhered to the inexorable system, and he had, in regard to those whom the law smites, all the ideas of the law. He had not yet, let us say, adopted all the ideas of progress. He had not yet come to distinguish between what is written by man and what is written by God, between law and right. He had not examined and weighed the right which man assumes to dispose of the revocable and the irreparable, and he had not revolted from the word vengeance. He thought it natural that certain infractions of the written law should be followed by eternal penalties, and he accepted social damnation as growing out of civilization. He was still at that point, infallibly to advance in time, his nature being good, and in reality entirely composed of latent progress. Through the medium of these ideas, Jean Valjean appeared to him deformed and repulsive. He was the outcast, he was the convict. This word was for him like the sound of the last trumpet, and after having considered Jean Valjean long, his final action was to turn away his head, vade retro. In this frame of mind, it was bitter perplexity to Marius to think that this man should henceforth have any contact whatsoever with Cosette. He thought himself too good, too mild, let us say the word, too weak. This weakness had led him to an imprudent concession. He had allowed himself to be moved. He had done wrong. He should have merely and simply cast off Jean Valjean. What should be done now? Jean Valjean's visits were very repugnant to him. Of what use was this man in his house? What should he do? Marius turned all this assemblage of ideas over in his mind, confusedly, passing from one to another, and excited by all, hence a deep commotion. It was not easy for him to hide this commotion from Cosette, but love is a talent, and Marius succeeded. Besides, he put without apparent object some questions to Cosette who, as candid as a dove is white, suspected nothing. He talked with her of her childhood and her youth, and he convinced himself more and more that all a man can be that is good, paternal, and venerable, this convict had been to Cosette. All that Marius had dimly seen and conjectured was real. This darkly mysterious nettle had loved and protected this lily.